Hello and welcome here to the B&B show. My name is Brandon, of course, and this guy right here, that's Brendan Nelson, Seahawks Brendan Nelson, back in the house here at the Hawks Nest as we chop it up on our double duty on the week here with the game preview of the Cardinals. Are you feeling you feeling froggy? You feeling lucky? Are you feeling lucky? Brendan, how are you?
That's an interesting one. I don't. I just don't. I'm feeling like we're gonna get whatever we deserve, and right now I'm feeling like that's not such a good thing. I want more than I deserve right now.
Yeah. So Green Bay's pointing the magnum at you. And you could reach over and reach for that shotgun, but you just can't count the number of bullets he's got. You think they got one more bullet in their gun is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like the Bears are gonna win, but I feel like the Seahawks are not gonna
Oh,
take care of their business. I gotta be real here. I
oh, hot take. Brendan in the house to lead us off, huh?
Yeah, that
Coming with the hot
we
takes.
don't have they won't have a bullet, but we won't either.
I or at the very least it's a blank.
Yeah,
It makes a loud sound, but there is no actual projectile.
yeah. That's kind of
Well,
how I'm feeling right now. It's not a good feeling.
I think it's very much a fair feeling to have at this point. This team has had many times throughout this year the control within their grasp to go up there and make their fate what they want it to be, rather than relying on the great football gods in order to make their hay. And instead, they find themselves back, as we were last season, in the final game of the season, needing this help from Green Bay. On top of, like you say, need to get a win that does look like a little bit on a little bit more of a shakier ground than you might just think. Where you go, well, it's a Cardinal team that's 4-12, and we're at this record, and so they've obviously shut it down, and they're done, and we're playing for something, and we're going to be hungry for it. So let's go get it done at this point. But not really the case, right? But there's a little bit more to this Cardinal team than just their record as we kind of look at them first, just outside looking in as we get to both sides of the ball with it. But a little bit different, this Cardinal team, in that, right?
Yeah, they're competitive in most every game they play. I think they've been blown out like twice this whole season, which is not easy to do. When you're a bad team, you usually find yourself getting blown out once every few games. They're constantly in the mix. They're coming off a few big wins. They beat the Steelers, they beat the Eagles. They've been playing pretty decent ever since Kyler Murray got back and gave them at least a capable quarterback threat. And more important than any of that, we can't stop the run. And right now, the seat of their power as a team is probably the fact that they got James Conner playing great football and they've got a dual threat quarterback. So you put all that together, I think we're going to have a very difficult time stopping this Cardinals team from scoring. Maybe we can keep up, but you're putting a lot on an offense with a really bad offensive line right now. And also, I remember when we drafted Jordan Brooks, we would talk about how, hey, part of the reason why you draft Jordan Brooks is because you plan on dealing with Kyler Murray a lot going forward. He's a linebacker who can kind of keep up with him. Not looking good, like we're not looking like we're going to have Jordan Brooks this week. So you put it all together, and I'm just like, I'm just not feeling it anymore.
Yeah, as I say, it's I think a very fair standpoint to take at this point. You bring it up; they've got ways to go at you, and I guess as we go into chop into some of those details a little bit, just to stay a little bit at the high rise of this for a second. I was very pessimistic of the Gannon hire when it came down the pike. I thought this is definitely not the Cardinals being able to pick from the best of the litter out in the NFL circles. And they're just taking a guy that's sort of somewhat of a hot guy in the moment, but not necessarily looked at. But he's come in there. And I think that he's done one of the hardest things that a coach can have to do in the NFL, Brennan, which is to have a team that is not the most talented, knows it's not the most talented, yet getting them to play at their hardest on a weekly basis. When watching the tape of this Cardinal team, that does seem to stand out to me. They lose games because they're just not talented enough, not because they don't play hard enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Gannon's done a good job now. There's a long lineage of coaches in all sports, not just football, all sports, who are really good at getting a lot out of a little, but then they fail to get a lot out of a lot. So we're going to have
True.
to see what happens. Presumably, at some point, the Cardinals are going to get better players. presumably at some point they're going to actually bring in players that Gannon wants. By the way, that's the other thing. He inherited all this. None of this is him except what? Man, they didn't even have a first-round pick last year because of Hollywood Brown trade, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So little of this is what he wanted. Like Garrett Williams, they got another couple of rookies like Kenny Stills, I think, or excuse me, Dante Stills. I don't know where I got Kenny Stills from, but
It all starts to run together. I do that same thing. You know that I'm horrible about that. Those names
yeah,
start to all run together, man. Get ready for it.
right. But yeah, so little this is him. Owen Popoe, I guess, is him. That's probably somebody that he's really excited about going forward. But yeah, this team that has every right to just be the worst team in the league this year, even though they have the record of one of the worst teams. I'm overall kind of impressed.
Yeah, well, and they will have gotten those 4 wins while playing within probably the toughest division in football, or one near 2 at the end of the year as well, which has to be put in perspective of where their record is. And you can't deny, as you watch the tape, that those guys rally around to the ball defensively. They put their hard hat on to stop the run. They will keep working with high motors to get to the quarterback, all across the board on that line. You can get after them as far as just being purely better, but you're not just going to be able to lean on them in this game in a week 17 matchup, hoping that their thoughts and mind are on Cancun or Cabo. They're going to be here in the moment. They're going to give you their best fight. And with Kyler Murray back there, as you said, there's a couple components here. And I guess let's start out with the Cardinal offense on this, as you kind of brought it up there,
Oh yeah. By the way, I forgot Paris Johnson Jr. They actually did have a first-round pick last year. My bad.
They did. No, you were thinking the year before, which was Brown. But they did get Paris Brown, and they did a good job in the last draft too by getting Paris and also doing some nice job of moving back in the draft. Remember on that one to allow the team to move up there. So they actually made
although
some
that Houston first-round pick did not pan out the way they were hoping, I think.
It could have gotten dark for us real quick on that one. Thankfully, just CJ Stroud was the real deal, and we did not get bid on that. But you bring up a good point. That one could have gone, especially even where the record is, where they're not going to be in a position to get Caleb Williams or Drake May. So this is a team that if you're looking for the Jaden Daniels sweepstakes, or maybe even Michael Penix sweepstakes, maybe this is a team that does kick the tires on that. But they're not in that position for the prime 2, which is interesting for them as they go in the future. They did not have Kyler Murray last time when they played us, Brendan. We did have a quarterback who kind of played the position a little bit similar to Kyler with Dobbs when he was in there, in his mobility and their use of his mobility. Have you had a chance to watch much of Kyler Murray coming back or track much of his progress here since he has returned?
Seen him play a fairly decent amount. It seems like he's playing pretty decently, just kind of nothing over the top. But like I'm thinking about that game they played against the Niners, where they lost because their defense is terrible, but Kyler was kind of helping them keep up a little bit. Kyler was making some plays to allow them to at least kind of stay in that game and be competitive. I thought I was pretty impressed. I don't know if he's been impressive enough to earn himself into the good graces of the new regime. I think that's probably not quite where he got to, but if, I do wonder if there's a scenario now where the Cardinals get to their pick, the quarterbacks they like are all gone, and they're just sitting there looking at like, okay, do we want to do Penix? Do we want to put him behind our crappy offensive line? Or do we just want to go with Kyler for one more year, see what's up, and maybe 2025 we get the new quarterback if Kyler doesn't turn it around? I do think that door is open a little bit now, whereas before the season started, I thought that door had been welded shut. So not too bad with Kyler, especially coming off a major injury.
Yeah, I think he seems to have a lot of the mobility he had prior. You don't see a reduction in his twitchiness and his get up and go, which is part of what really helps him as a QB to be able to just sort of instantaneously get away from a guy that's right there next to him. So he's been able to get out there still. I don't know if he's probably not at 100% of what he was with that, but he does look close to, and the willingness to still extend those plays. They also seem to be doing a little bit of a marrying between the spread concepts and actually asking him to do a little bit of under center stuff and play action stuff and rolling him out. I mean, he's taken to it okay, like you say. I think he's been fine. There's been some games where he had some bright highlights. I watched the Eagle game, which he was pretty good. And what stood out to me with the offense is this is not an offense that's going to overthink itself here when it comes to Murray and the passing attack, Brendan. They went after that Eagles defense, which has some concepts that we have that are similar in the dink and dunk fashion. And I'll just throw it underneath if it's there to throw it underneath. They're still talking a little bit in looking a little bit into depth on this about Murray still not quite at that point of going through the reads thing. It's still a little bit of one read to the run, one read to the run, not
Mhm.
as much of bink, bink, bink. But it does seem that there's been a progression, especially if you consider the under center stuff for him. Brendan is it's kind of like the first time maybe he's ever run it in his career. I don't even know if even back in high school he was running anything
Yeah, I'd be
under center.
very interested to see what percentage of their offense is under center now.
Yeah, it's not a lot, but it's definitely being worked in versus the Kingsbury. Everything's a spread four wide receiver concept. That it definitely stands out watching them versus when you've seen them in years past in that little way. Um, but he's doing well. He's not making any major mistakes out there, and he's using his legs when he needs to, making just enough passes at times. They don't have much at receiver. That's the thing that stands out to them when you look at their passing attack, Brendan. I think they have coming into last week's game, Brendan. The receivers had collectively for the season 1,500 yards just from
Yeah,
the
I mean,
receivers.
this shocking breakout of Trey McBride has really helped them get away with that. He's
It
been
has.
much better than I expected coming out. I remember that tight end class, that was a really weak tight end class. I don't think either of us liked any of them.
No, he was a guy that I think even begrudgingly were like, okay, I guess he's a second rounder, but we don't see a lot of upside here in that second round. It was kind of like a boring second rounder. And a few bad tight end classes there, Brendan, that all kind of stacked in together. Some of those classes have kind of run together for me a little bit because we just haven't had much talent at the position. And even this year's doesn't look, last year's was pretty good, but this year's doesn't look, it looks more in line with what we've seen recently from it and scouting some of these guys here early on. But McBride, good hands, just a smart guy in space and where to sit down in zones. And he's just going to go find that little spot, sit down, and Murray will go hit him. They'll run little option routes down there inside, and it'll work all day if you're going to drop back into space. Like I was watching what the Eagles doing in the prior game where they're just dropping, we've seen it time and time again. You just drop in those deep zones and you have an offense that's committed to hitting the underneath stuff and just kind of picking you apart bit by bit.
Hmm. Right.
Well, the real place that I think that this offense is going to probably threaten us in this game, Brendan, that stands out to me is going to be the in the ground attack and the rushing attack. In that
Hmm.
they're getting a player back that they didn't have last time, who's been to me another guy that I kind of long underrated, but you've got to start to give him his props for what he's become as a player and what he's been as a player for the Cardinals, and that's James Conner.
Oh yeah.
Back on the scene for them. An interesting running back, and one that this week I think, like you talked about, we come off the heels of a Najee Harris and being that bigger, bruising back, and what he did to the defense last week, and you go, okay, now you got kind of another one here in this guy, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. I was kind of looking at him as a guy who was probably past his prime at this point, that had probably already had his best seasons at this point in his career. Like, I didn't think he was going to have much left after he left Pittsburgh. It seems like a lot of players leave Pittsburgh, offensive players at least, and then they don't reclaim that production. But he's really kind of more than once now since leaving Pittsburgh gone above and beyond the previous expectations. So yeah, he's been very impressive. According to PFF, this is his best season ever. Best season,
Hmm.
even better than 2021. That was the year I think he had 20 touchdowns or something, and he looked like a young Leonard Fournette running out there. Every time I watched him play, I just kept thinking Leonard Fournette for some reason. He just he looked different in that Cardinals uniform somehow. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's been great for them. And when you throw in the Kyler effect as well, you gotta wonder, how is this team going to stop their rushing attack? And the answer, I think, is they kind of don't. I don't think they have answers for it. So that is why I'm going into this game kind of pessimistic about it. I just look at that Connor Murray duo out of the backfield, and I'm not sure what we can do.
Yeah, I view at this point in the way that this has really moved for me. I look at Connor as a maybe not hugely better, but at least a little bit marginally better than well, the margin just better than Najee Harris. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think that's pretty fair. I thought he was just kind of a guy, just another guy. Nothing really stood out to me about him. So that hasn't been the case. And obviously good for him. He's actually only 28. That's not as old as I thought he was, but still, I still would have assumed less of him going into this season.
And the third, even though he's been out for a partial amount of this year, to your point about the type of year he's having, the third amount most of 20 yards or more runs in the entire NFL in addition to that. For a guy that's not known for being a home run hitter or a guy that's going to bust out those kind of carries on the often, and it just stands out that he's really feels like a guy that's, I don't want to say mastered the position in his reads and vision and knowing the right move to make every play and the right decision to go make, but it feels very close to that in watching him with the tape, with his patience to sit behind blockers, to other plays where you'll see him press the hole fast when he can sense it. And then just an ability to keep his feet. He's different than Najee. To me, Najee would just, run up there to press the hole, Brendan. He gets up there to press that hole, and then he wants to kind of bounce one way or the other, and then create his crack of daylight with that. With Connor, you can use him in every way in the ground game, up the middle, outside. Not really necessarily just because he's a fast guy to the outside, but because he does have that good vision and an ability to move off the block so well and reading leverage. But he's going to be a problem this week, and he's really hard to bring to the ground for a Seahawks team that has times had some issues aplenty in their ability to stop the run.
Yeah. It's as bad as it was last year now. We are basically at the point where it's equivalent to what it was last year. So I don't see how anything good happens. I just don't. This is a team that is currently making it so that things like the Cardinals wide receiver core being so bad right now. It's Michael Wilson, Rondell Moore, and Dortch, I think his name is. Dortch, like George.
That's right.
Like, that's not even going to matter because we can't stop the run. Why would they ever throw the ball? It's going to be like one of those Kansas State college games where they just hand the ball off 50 times and call it good. That's my fear going into this game.
Mine too. Or then they mix it's the bubble screens and stop routes in space, right? So then that's the only time that they do throw is it's that and like 1-9 ball through the course of the game. So I think they're going to take the path of least resistance as this Cardinal team. If you supply them that, and this is going to require the Seahawks team to do some things that they don't like to tend to do, Brendan, as far as bringing down maybe more of those stacked boxes, opening a little bit more of the holes to the back end to try to help fix up their run problems up front. Will they take those steps? You and I have talked about it. We don't do a lot of we think they should, just because they just haven't shown that willingness to do it. It was nice to see the 5-man fronts last week. I certainly would say that couldn't hurt again this week versus just trust in the 4-man fronts. But it's just going to come down to the Hawks' willingness to, get in there and tackle and use their technique that they've been taught and trained and know how to use and get their nose in there dirty to get it done, or not, and may have some guys still making those at times business decisions and not always bought in, it seems like, in the ground game process and stopping the run. And you don't have all 11 guys in. You got some of the guys, but not all 11. And that's what it takes to stop a really good rushing attack. And that's the one thing when you look at Brendan, look at the PFF overview scores for the positions for the Cardinals. It's the one area in running the ball that they do really well. This is their spot. So they can attack the best, no matter 4-12 team or not. They can attack at their best at what we do at our worst. And that's always going to be worrisome.
Yeah, this is a game of matchups. And this matchup is not in our favor. So, by the way, Jaron Reed hasn't practiced yet this week. Neither has Mario Edwards. So, even some of the guys we have as part of our bad run defense may not be there. And no, I don't think the guys sitting behind them on the practice squad are going to be better.
Yeah.
So
no, they're not. Yeah. It's they were trying to protect him last week. We talked about it on the post game wrap up about Cam Young and Miles Adams. 13 collective snaps between the two of them last week, and both of them were your lowest rated players by PFF. The team's trying to protect them. Team's trying to just go out there and say, hey, we're going to give you 7 plays a game. Just turn your engine up to 150 miles an hour and let it rip. Don't be worried about saving anything for the tank, because we're going to let you go get a blow on the sideline the second you make a couple out there for 2 plays, and still can't give you much of any impact on the back of that. And yet these guys might have to, if both Edwards and him are out, that means, both of those 2 guys are going to get a heavy amount of rotation inside, or I guess they'll put Dre'mont back inside, I suppose, and we'll just get a lot more Darrell Taylor experience of the others. It's sort of I don't know. I don't know if there's a good approach on that one if you're that light at the defensive tackle, like you say.
Yeah.
We didn't lead with that, by the way. I know we usually do. Let's do it now since you did mention it. Where are we at with the injuries right now coming into this game?
Well, Phil Haynes and Jordan Brooks practiced a little bit yesterday and did not practice today. So that could be load management, or it could be, He's not ready to go. Shut it
Mm,
down. Could be
yeah.
that. We won't know until tomorrow, really. So that's not looking too good. Leonard Williams also did not practice today, but in his case, I think it's definitely a load
Yeah.
management type thing. We got Mario Edwards Jr. and Jaron Reed have not practiced yet this week. So that's most of your defensive line, really. That's devastating to this team. I mean, they're already depending on Jaron Reed to play 800 snaps every game. It's like, I don't know what you do without him.
Yeah, it's gonna be troublesome on this one if we don't have those guys. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Abe Lucas and Peters, they're not going to play this week. I think we've already kind of assumed that going in. Even Carroll was like, yeah, I don't think we're going to have those guys this week. And usually when he says that, there's something going on there. The only player to ever beat his injury expectations is Jordan Brooks.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't ever remember him when he gets dark on it, that guy's out. He's
Hmm.
usually upwardly optimistic.
Good news is that K9 is on the comeback trail. He practiced a little bit today, should play. Looks good over there. And Evan Brown made his way back to the practice field today after dealing with a concussion. Now, concussions are kind of weird, so that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play, but it's certainly a vote of confidence in favor of him being available.
That's true. At the very least, you maybe got him as a backup there if he isn't ready to roll
Hmm. Could
in
be the
full.
final game of Evan Brown's Seahawks career. We'll always remember all those great moments.
The vaunted season of Brown.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, not that I want him to be concussed, but I would not hate having a game to look at Oluwatimi personally. So if he ends up having to sit this game out, I got no problem with that.
I wouldn't either, and I would kind of like to be able to see that as well. That's one of the places we're trying to get a feel for what we have in order to know how hard we have to address it this offseason.
Mhm, exactly.
Well, so your outlook in this is, I'm sure mine is. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with this. Is that probably the Hawks at best will try to roll maybe the 5-man boxes, but the guys up front are gonna have to get it done. The young guys, Miles Adams and Cam Young, who was a guy I got heat about. Brendan did my draft review on him, and I go, man, this guy's in. I don't know if I know it's going to be there here. And everybody's like, no, he'll start this year. I'm like, no, it's in rough shape right now. He's got a long way to go. But hey, maybe it's been a long year. They're getting their opportunity here and now. You go out there and you flash here in this experience. I could make everybody feel real good about you going into this offseason in either of those two players' cases. But they're gonna have to put
Yeah.
on the big boy pants, get out there and get it done this week. Because even if Jaron's ready, if Mario can get you a couple snaps, they can give you 65 snaps out there again this game.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. And honestly, Cam Young's been okay this year, I think overall better than I thought. I did not have high expectations. He's been manageable. He's had some decent moments. He actually got 2 QB pressures this year, which is 2 more than I thought he was going to get. So,
That's hell, when you put it in that perspective, Brendan, that is true. Yeah, that is very true. So we'll see what they can do here defensively on that. As we talked about in the back end, I don't think we have much to worry about as far as coverage because I just don't think they're going to try to challenge us much in coverage. With it's going to be stop routes, out routes, sit down in front of the zone, sit down in space where you find open holes in the zone. I don't think you're going to get a lot of crazy route concepts or anything, in that respect of things. One little note in regards to your, snap counts and whatnot. By the way, one of my subscribers did some of the math on this, Brendan, according to them, which is that we were trying to figure out in the last show how many extra snaps our Hawks had played defensively speaking. When you factor it out to how much that might be contributing to some of the tackling issues and fatigue, it came out to that we are the second most amount of defensive snaps in the NFL, and that when you put us in comparison to like a team like the Niners, we've played a game and a half more on our defensive bodies than the Niners have on their defensive bodies. If that makes sense in the way that I'm putting it.
yeah, I get you. I mean, that's something that I think about sometimes, man. It's like a pitch count with a pitcher. You want to work that pitch count with these starting pitchers, right? You want to get them
Mhm.
out of the game quicker. It's like this is kind of like the same thing. You want to work that snap count on these defensive players.
Yeah.
And Carroll has been talking a lot lately about the fact that we're not running the ball very well, and it's clear that his di- um, dissatisfaction with the run game isn't really about scheme, isn't really about success or the players. It's just about the fact that we don't have the ball enough to run the ball enough, and that we don't have leads at the end of these games where we can just run the clock out. Like, it's situational more than it is something actually structurally wrong with the run game in his mind. And there is definitely some truth there. You can run the ball much better if you actually have the ball with the lead late in the game.
Mm. Agreed. Yeah, especially if you've had that chance to wear down that defense and get them into a fatigue state where you can go and, take advantage of that. So it is something I think about as well a lot on how this factors in a lot of different reasons, looking at the snap count, what the defense is and how that can affect things. But it definitely plays a part when you look at guys getting wore down, especially Brendan. I think it gets exacerbated a little bit when you think about the extra game the NFL just added, the 2 Thursday night games this season. There was already a little bit of a stress test going on here with these bodies and whether they can hold up. And then you say, and oh, by the way, you're going to play a game and a half extra over this same time period with other teams, and other players in the league won't have to go anywhere near that mark. That's where I think it gets to a point where a bit of what I call maybe even a breaking point a little bit with that, but just a theory. And I'm not sure on it. I'm just, I'm throwing it out there as much as anything.
Right. I get you.
Well, let's flip over then. We're then going to need to flip over to the offensive side of the ball here, Brendan. And from your outlook on this and my outlook on this, they're going to need to make some. They're going to really need to make it happen here, and probably also by our outlook of this, Brendan, because we're anticipating the run game to be a bit of an issue, and the time of possession to shrink the clock across the board in the quarters. That this offense is not only going to have to be good, they're going to have to be good in a very efficient fashion as well.
Yeah, I mean, the margin of error for this offense is really thin. That's something that we talked about a couple days ago, and it's something that continues to bother me and will never stop bothering me. That in order for this team to win, we need guys like Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, JSN, and K9 to be perfect. Like, there's no margin for error for those guys, and especially in the case of a guy like Geno Smith, that just feels so wrong. Like, this is a guy who took a big discount so you would have more money to go fill out the rest of the team. This is a guy whose cap hit this year is $10 million. He's making less than half what the top guys are making, the top guys who signed their contract last offseason anyway, because he was like, okay, here's your savings. Now go get me a better team. And this is the situation. There's something about that over anything else I'm going to remember about this season, even if we do make the playoffs. Just, I cannot believe we actually did that.
Yeah, I can't believe we're in this territory as well, as that's the expectation. And by some of the measure of people that I get interactions with online here in my chat, and it's not a big contingent, they're just small, big, large, tiny contingents. I think there's a big, tiny contingent that feels like Gino has to do that. And if he isn't doing that, that's just showing he's not the guy. It's like, are we looking at the rest of the parts of this team when we're going to the Geno criticism stuff before we get to, putting it all into that proper perspective? And I don't know if he always gets that fair shake from the fandom in that part of things. And you mentioned DK. I think there's some similar, for different reasons, there's some similar lack of fair shake being given to DK as well at times on this stuff. We look at the offensive side of the ball here. This Cardinal team is try hard to the nth degree on the defensive side of their ball. They're going to do, nothing significantly extravagant. They don't have anybody that's really going to turn the tide defensively. Budda Baker is back. Odd that he made that Pro Bowl over Winfield, which got a little bit of pub, and I thought Winfield deserved to go. I thought he's really become the player I thought he'd be when he came out. But nonetheless, Budda is back, and I don't think he was there in the first game. I think we had no Budda, did we? Were we Budda-less?
That was his first game back.
Okay, might have been his first game back. Yeah. So he's at least back there doing what he does, being a guy that is a factor in the run game and kind of a little bit of a missile back there at times and give you just a little bit in coverage as well on the other side of it. What do you see from this defense after 17 games that stands out to you?
Not necessarily a ton. They've been a little nondescript to me, even in that Eagles game, biggest win of the season. They really didn't play that good. They won that game because of their offense. But I do kind of like what they're doing at edge rusher right now. They've got Gardeck on one side, who I've always liked. I've always liked Gardeck as kind of like a sleeper, sneaky effective edge player. Mm-hmm. Just one of those guys that no one ever really discusses, but he's been nice. And they moved Zaven Collins down to the edge, where I think he started out on the inside, right?
Middle linebacker, yeah.
Yeah, and he seems like he's a little bit better there. So they've been creative with these linebackers over the last couple of years. Isaiah Simmons, I think, was playing safety by the end in Arizona, and now they've got Collins playing on the edge. And I mean, he's still not worth the capital they gave up to draft him, but at least he's found something he's pretty good at. But overall, no, I don't think this Arizona defense is all that. I'm at a cornerback. I think Byron Murphy's hurt,
Mhm.
right? So that was probably their key cornerback. Yeah, that's their best cornerback. Him and Hamilton were their key guys there. So now they've got a Starling Thomas V. I remember scouting that guy for the draft, a UDFA rookie starting at cornerback for them, I believe. So
Ooh.
you should be able to pick on that. Their defensive line might be down Dante Stills, which is not one of their best players, but a player who's playing fairly decently. You're going to want to attack that. So I look at this defense and I say, this offense might be able to keep up. Not saying they will, but they might.
LJ Collier on the IR, by the way, too, for the
I think
Cardinals.
he played one game and pieced out.
He gave him 2 tackles, but those tackles, Brendan, okay, don't undersell those 2 tackles because they help them still lose the game. But they look like they are kind of beat up on the defensive line when you do look at their injury report a bit. Kevin Strong is questionable. Dante Still is questionable. Leaky Fatu is on IR. Carlos Watkins, IR. Jonathan Ledbetter, IR. They're definitely hurting a little bit there as well. Kaiser White out. I think he was playing pretty decent ball for them. They've got him on the IR now. A middle linebacker there that was starting to kind of slide in and find a role. They had guys like Gardeck here. They've got a couple of these guys, Brendan. They're these kind of aging kind of journeyman players that have come in and they've been given their opportunity. Then they're taking the bull by the horns with this opportunity and giving it their all. I mean, a guy in Gardeck, you can see that he just playing 100 miles an hour out there, and he's going to hit somebody. He's going to go try a tackle. He's going to go do whatever, but he's going to just do whatever he can to try to have some impact. You can really sense that guy's love of the game and what he's doing out there and what's at the stakes at play for a guy like that, trying to keep your football life fully alive, and maybe has found a future there, the Cardinals, with how he's played. Not been sensational, but maybe just found at least a bit of a role with them. Well, you could go at the run game, you could go at the pass game, both with the Cardinals on this a little bit. Do you have a way you lean in this game that do you just try to find a little bit like the balance they did last game against the Steelers, and especially in that first half between the run and the pass, or do you lean into more of, I'm going to go after the Sterling, Whitehouse, Nightingale, what was his name?
Starling Thomas V.
Starling Thomas V. I'm going to go at these guys. I'm going to go ahead and try to attack them. Or do you try to lean into a little bit more of that balance here? Like, hey, I can get it either way. I can pass, I can run. Why pick one?
I'm still not really trusting this run blocking. Still not really trusting this offensive line, although I did see some signs of life against Pittsburgh. I thought that first half, K9 was actually having some holes to run through. He was actually having a little bit of stuff to work with, but now we might have a center coming off a concussion, so I'm really excited to watch him snap the same way that Alabama center was snapping. That's going to be great.
It's true. Olatimi was kind of a little dicey. I don't know. The snapping's become now a new lost art or something, I guess, here. Nobody knows how to do it anymore, So.
Right. Another reason to go under center.
Yeah, exactly. I love the under center stuff too, man. That's one thing with it is we don't play action with Geno and rollouts with Geno to the side, and especially early in the game when you're trying to get him in a rhythm, Brendan. One of the plays that I love most in this playbook is that play action to an outside zone run, let's say left side, then you have Geno roll back to the right, and then you have a Tyler Lockett or the tight end underneath, cut up underneath, and you just, whether you get the defender unblocked going down to the run game or the defender then going to Geno, leaving the receiver open, then coming back underneath, it just seems to always be there and a good, nice, easy completion there for Geno. And I think you're going to have to end up trying to be explosive in the passing game here, to your point as well, that it's going to have to be a little bit of the volume passing game that gets this done as much as you can with how the possessions will work. Hopefully the defense can get better in the ground game, but I don't think you can just try to play we'll outdo the Cardinals at their own game kind of thing in this one. You're going to have to lean on this strength and go take it if you wanted to carry the day on this one,
Yeah, I'm not interested in pounding the ball up A gap and B gap for 2.5 yards a carry. I want to attack this secondary. I want to go after with our strength. Our strength remains our receivers. Our passing game, I think, is still our strength more than anything else. Like, what else do we do well? we get a lot of sacks, but really, actually, if you look at it, our ability to generate QB pressure is not that good. So if you were to try to say what our strengths are as a team, it's the passing attack and punting.
Yeah. It's very true. That's very true. That's what it is. What it is at this point in the year, Brendan. You can't run from it. You've had plenty of games. This ain't sample size season anymore. You're in the full meal deal of it. You are what you are when you land at this point in time this year. So use the horse you rode in on, so to speak. And we'd love to have had a better ground game this year, but it ain't going to turn over suddenly in this game into another better place. I don't even think we ran particularly great against the Cardinals in the first game, did we?
I don't think the offense had a very good game in that game. That was a
Yeah.
very kind of plodding game. That was the game we didn't have Metcalf. Metcalf
right.
missed that game.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I feel like we had just a couple of drives we were able to just kind of carve out, but that was just about it in that one. And they're going to have to be better this week, I think, because that Cardinals with Connor, who wasn't there in that first matchup, have him here, and he's going to be a hammer on this Hawks defense. And as we've seen many weeks over here with this Hawks defense, hammers can eventually bust a hole through the wall of the defense, and that hole will just then remain. So hopefully the defense brings their hard hats, Brendan, their pails. They get ready for a long day. They wrap up. They understand that this is it. The sense of urgency that's been missing at times, you hope, is there. But as much the offense is going to have to be good, the defense is going to have to get a couple stops in this game, or at least, by God, a couple turnovers. Brendan, do something on that side of the ball to help out your O in this game if you're going to get gouged in the rushing attack that much.
Right.
We've got a donation from Tezakaku. Thank you for the $7 donation, Tez. Did you see the guy who jumped at a judge? Might need him on defense.
Yeah, I've seen that one for sure. That's all over the place.
Yeah, I did. Ballsy leap on his part. I can only imagine how that's going to add to a sentence of a guy that was just denied probation. So it's kind of like,
yeah. Me and my friend actually did some deep diving into that. He was on his third. That was his third strike. He was already done no matter what.
Was it legitimate? Was the whole thing, or was his anger? Was his anger legitimate?
It was no, he was angry because he was about to get sentenced to life without parole.
Oh, okay. Well, at that point, yeah, who cares? At that point, I guess you're going to take your.
I mean, I wonder if he goes to a supermax now instead or something.
That's true. Well, at the very least, the guards might not treat you very well. You know what I mean? Like that's and you don't want to be in that lane either, right? It can get real dark.
That guy ruined it for everyone else too. Now everybody who goes to one of those sentencing hearings is going to be like Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, they are. No, judge, I'm good. Please let me out. It'll just make them get the harsher sentence because they'll see the face mask on and just yeah. But it was a hell of a leap. How about this Denoffiger? Guy looked about 5'4", and he's in there. He's in there throwing some punches. I was like, the judge has got to get, I don't know, whatever he's getting a credit for class or something like that. He looked about 18, but he's in there throwing his punches on the back.
Pretty
impressive. What he can. I was impressed by that. I was like, all right, you go, guy, get it. Go get him.
Yeah. And we did some more research, me and my friend the other night on stream when we were talking about this. And I was wondering why he didn't just get shot. And I guess bailiffs don't carry guns anymore because they're not actually cops. They're basically like mall cops. And it's been kind of contracted out to them. So they can't carry a gun. So and I found that interesting. I was like, man, how far can this guy push it before they just pull a gun on him? And they didn't.
I guess that is kind of like down to even being like a Hollywood meme, right? Because in the Hollywood movies, going back 30, 40 years, like what's the meme is that the guy that always gets his gun taken is either a bailiff or the security guard in the bank. The guy does the move where he pulls up behind him and takes his gun out because he's so inept because he's not like a real cop kind. So I guess that does kind of add up as far as like that makes sense. You think at least they have like a taser though or something, that he could hit him with. Because they took him a while. There was like, he had some time to do some potential damage there.
Right.
Where they didn't have anything on it. So I don't know on that one. But thank you, Tezakaku. It was a pretty crazy step. I think like Brendan said, they're now going to go in there chained to the floor. And so he's like the shoe bomber guy ruined it for all of us air travelers. This guy's now going to ruin it for any of those potential people coming into the.
Yeah. What was the movie where they're in the prison where they all wear these like steel boots and the floors are magnetic? That was Face Off, wasn't it?
That was Face Off. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, it's going to be like that.
exactly.
All these courtrooms are going to have magnetic floors.
All right. I know we got everyone going in. They got to walk around with 20-pound boots on their feet.
Hmm.
Remember the sound of it? It's a very satisfying noise in that movie. I still remember the.
Yeah.
Taker 610. Thank you for the $2 donation. Would you guys draft a quarterback if you're the Cards?
Well, let me take a look real quick here. So Tankathon currently has them sitting at 4. The issue for them is the Bears could take Caleb. The Commanders could take May, and the Patriots could take Daniels. That's very reasonable to think, right? That's not a stretch to imagine quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting there at 4. Don't you? Wouldn't you rather just take Harrison?
He becomes a
Call it a day?
no-brainer. He becomes a no-brainer at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I don't think you reach for QB4 at that point. I don't think you I do consider Penix to be a reach at that point. I know that we're all a little bit higher on him right now because of the game he just played against Texas. But taking Penix at 4 to me is kind of, I don't know, that I think you would not be too thrilled about that if you're a fan of that team.
I still feel very strongly about the assessment of being that I think Penix is a top 20 guy. He has a potential to sneak into the back of the 10, but he's a top 20 guy in my opinion. I do think Daniels is a top 10. I think the Taker, it all depends on this. It's Harrison. He's the pivot thing here. They went out and got Paris Johnson and they got Humphreys there. Their tackle situation's fine. So Pashanu or the other tackles really not in play there. So it does, you laser in on, does team number 3 being the Patriots draft a QB or not? And then they get to go off that. And if Harrison, who's probably the number 1 most talented player next with Caleb in this draft, and you get that at 4, from a Cardinals organization standpoint, you love that pick. I mean, it doesn't matter what quarterback you're bringing into the future to pair with Marvin. You're just going, yes, I mean, this worked well for us. So I would see probably the way you just said, Brendan, just we go back to those drafts. Like this is a draft that feels like it's going like the one they did with, doesn't it? Like the Trevor Lawrence, Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, feed Justin Fields draft. Like, doesn't this feel like that one where it's like you start the process out thinking, okay, it's Trevor Lawrence and like Justin Fields is going to be in there. And then like by the end of it, you're getting the Wilsons up there and Trey Lance is up there. And then, yeah, sure. McCorkle Jones is definitely a first rounder. That seemed like that. This draft feels like it's going that same kind of way to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can kind of feel that way too. I mean, we have, it's not just that draft. We see quarterbacks get elevated into the higher end first round out of nowhere during the draft process all the time. Like, I remember Jay Cutler coming out of nowhere, and he ended up in the top 12, I think.
Yeah.
Ryan Tannehill kind of came out of nowhere, and suddenly he was a top 12 quarter pick.
Oh, yeah.
So there will probably be one guy like that. There usually is.
Yeah, Tannehill had a crazy pro day. There was a whole Carroll was there, and there's a whole Carroll quote of him being there where he like shouted out at one point after the workout. He's like, "What am I even doing here? We're not going to be drafting high enough to pick this guy," and like left the facility or something like that, or supposedly. So, he had that wide receiver 40 time he put on his pro day numbers, and then threw the ball over the place. But yeah, I think that there's what's weird though is then we have the drafts too, like the one a couple years ago at the Pickett draft, Brendan, where nobody wants to touch a quarterback with a 10-foot pole. And it's like, they've got some inoperable, disease sometimes. So it goes weird the other way too at times, but this one is definitely slanting that way. And I think the Cardinals are not going to be pressured to take the QB, but more Taker just because of where they're picking, like Brendan said, where it'll probably be 4th, and not likely to improve, right, Brendan? Look at the Tankathon. Is it going to improve this week if they lose?
Well, the Patriots would have to win or the Commanders would have to win. And unlikely on both counts, I think.
Yeah, I'm not.
Especially because I guess Washington's still stuck with Howell because Brissett got hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. Howell was starting to kind of track backwards, but they're not gonna reverse their form. So they'll stay with where they're at. Why does Washington affect though? Because they wouldn't be ahead of them, would they? Washington's not ahead of them on the.
Washington's at 2. Washington has the number 2 pick.
Commanders have 2.
Yeah,
Why did I
the
think? Okay.
it's Bears at the 1, Commanders at the 2, New England at the 3.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So there you go.
Mhm.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
Washington and New England are separated by 0.003 on their strength of schedule, so it could shift, which
Okay.
would be very interesting if New England ended up getting Drake May by like 0.001 strength of schedule. That'd be crazy.
That would be crazy. That's a hard to mathematically just get to even that level of
Mhm.
difference. But hey, you know, good for New England at that point, especially if they're going in a heavily new direction this offseason. It sounds like from the top down.
Yep.
Um, Long live the king. Thank you for the $5 donation. Says we benefited from the Rust trade financially and talent wise. But did we truly win the trade? Because our schemes don't maximize the use of talent.
Well, I don't usually say things like this, but this is going to be a circumstance where I really need to advocate for people trying being a little patient with this. Some of these players that we got in that trade just got here. This is literally Devin Witherspoon has not played a full season in the NFL yet. We still don't know what Boye Mafe is going to be. We still don't really know what Charles Cross is going to be. Like, we're going to need time to really like the fact that we didn't win a Super Bowl within the first 2 years of trading Russ does not mean we need to now make that trade less than it actually was. Like, maybe we will end up not taking full advantage of the assets we got, but the assets we got are still phenomenal.
Yeah, I think King, I definitely am where Brendan is, and just add even further with what Brendan says on this. I'd say King that it really what your scheme does to use the talent kind of has nothing to do with another what you get from the assets that you got back and the players you're selecting. Did you make good selections of the good players and the good picks who have the best talent available to you? That's the determinant to me of whether you won the trade or not. Not did you use those talents the best thing? That's a coaching problem. That's a whole separate issue. That's not a trade problem. That's not a wielding and dealing problem. That's not a John Schneider should have gotten more kind of problem, which is when we look at these trades, that's really what we're saying. Did this general manager get more than this other general manager? Did he beat him in this trade? It's not really about what the coaches then do at the bottom level to it. And so I would differentiate. I think those two for me, King. I can't pair those two things together in myself. Like Brendan has said, though, as well, got to be patient with what we got here to figure out what we have. I still think that we wildly won the trade because these players have shown enough. At least maybe they're not going to be stars, maybe they will be stars, but they've shown enough that they're not going to probably be busts, and that you're going to get some good returns back for a quarterback who we're now finding was, potentially truly just about at the end of the line. And that makes
Yeah.
it you like you say, removing, and that's even removing the financial component, which is a part of the process that cannot be ignored. But just even ignoring that, it's still a win for the Hawks and what they've pulled.
Yeah, I said this in a tweet shortly after it was announced that Denver was benching Wilson. I said, imagine for a moment in March of 2022, the Denver Broncos called up the Seahawks and said, "We want to give you 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 3 players for nothing. We just want to give you these assets, right? Like you,
Mm,
you literally don't have to give us a thing. We're just going to give you 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 3 players." It would be one of the biggest scandals in NFL history. The commissioner would step in to stop it. It would be the Denver fans would be marching on the stadium trying to demand the owner sell for this awful disgrace of a football decision. Like it would still to this day probably be one of the biggest sports stories ever. Now consider what they did was actually much, much worse.
yeah, I was going to just say that.
Yeah, what they did was far worse. They would have been better off giving us that stuff.
Hmm.
So, yeah, you can win the trade. That doesn't mean you're going to flip those assets and win a Super Bowl immediately with those assets. That's typically not how it works. So we shouldn't I don't think we can put those two things in the same lane at all.
Yeah, I can do it as well, but I think we are going to both now in this moment where I stand and both 2-3 years down the line on this, King, say and feel that this is a trade that we remarkably won. The way Brendan just kind of termed it is a good way of just, like you said, it was worse the way that he just presented. Them just giving you those assets, it was far worse because of how he set that franchise back now, both in how they tried to build around him and then also now in the dead money that they're having to sustain as he now leaves and moves on. And so it was a much more pain inflicted there. And that's what makes it not just a one trade and a remarkably one, but then even the financial part comes in as this cherry on top that you dodged that $55 million bullet. And it becomes absolutely one of the best trades in football history at that point when you add that part into the process. But we'll see how we do have to see how this does play out for both the good side and bad, where these players really land and how it all boils down to when we get to the final point.
Right.
Thank you, King. I appreciate you for the donation. Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $5 dono. Says, would you be okay with a full strip down of the organization like John, Pete, front office, scouts, all let them go?
I like the job John has done lately, but I'm not so attached to him that I would refuse to part with him if it actually meant tearing things up a little bit. The thing that would suck about a teardown would be that you've got a lot of young players on this team that you'd have to make a decision on. Like, do we think that would we want to keep Boye Mafe around in time for the next buildup? Would we want to keep Charles Cross around in time for the next buildup? How would we make all this timeline thing work? But we've seen that strip downs and buildups can happen very quickly. So I would not be afraid of a complete teardown like this.
I wouldn't be afraid of the complete teardown either on this feed me. I do share a little bit of Brennan's hesitancy when it comes to potentially scouts in front office and John. And really there's a part of this question I always say, feed me, that the most important part of this question goes to when we look at, let's say, the top 10 or some of the big problems with this organization and roster building, which would be on John's plate. How much of that was Pete and his ability to override John as basically John's head through these years? You know, when it comes to going for a guy like Jimmy Graham or Jamal Adams, or making some of these defensive trades where they're giving up short-term assets, long-term assets for short-term players. Who's the one driving that? Is it one guy that's been doing it? Is it both of them doing their equal bits of it? We don't kind of know that information from Feed Me, and that always makes it hard to answer your question on this, because I can the scouts and front office people could be doing a great job right now, doing one of the best jobs in the league, but then finding that their coaching staff at the bottom line of it is just not able to even come close to getting the most out of these players. And that's where it could then fall more heavily onto the shoulders of that. And if that's the case, then you're not looking as much to necessarily cut everything, throwing the baby out with the bathwater just for the sake of it, so to speak. I'd need to know some of those answers to those questions to be able to make that determination. And I don't have those answers, unfortunately. The other thing with this is Pete's always had power over John, and then thusly with it, all power over the rest of the front office and scouts with it. So John's never really had the power to wield. This is what comes down to that question, and why it's so hard to answer is who's really been running this show. And is Carroll running with a heavy-handed approach? Has he been hands off and John's just been able to run free and wild, and that these things can actually land on John's door? And, but a long way around the bend on that one, Brendan. You're still where I'm at on it, which is that if that's this what it takes us to get to change, we do need change here. And if that's what it took to get to change, I'd do it. But it's more to me, the issues at this point come down to really coaching as much as anything beyond. Certainly can help getting more talented and better. That doesn't hurt things, and there's room for that. But if we're looking at the biggest issues, or the core root issues, that's where I find it at.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. But John has been a good GM the last couple of years, I think, with what he's been able to control. Not that we have a full idea of what he does control, but as near as I can tell, it seems like he's doing his job. But I don't believe he's the only person in the world who can do that job. I think that if you have to move off John to get rid of Pete, you can find another good GM.
Agreed. And to your point about recent success, being on the right side of the Russell deal, not trading him a year earlier when I don't think you would have gotten as good of assets, and you would have had to eat way more dead money. The Geno decision to ride with him as your quarterback, and then to not have, when he was rewarding you at the comeback of the season, you didn't come back and then pay him a Daniel Jones contract. you found a way to put him onto a deal that was very advantageous. Good value signings, in my opinion, over the past couple of years and what they've done in free agency with what they've worked with. From what he's done, I didn't mind the Uchenna signing. As we saw, his missing place from this defense, you could really feel and hurt when he wasn't there. So at least over the last couple of years, you look down the line from the draft to how he spent money to most of the deals. I know some people are sore about the Leonard Williams one. That's another one to me. We got to wait until we see what happens with his contract and if the team actually does retain him, because people's hate of that trade seems to always boil down to the fact that, well, now he's going to walk and you got nothing. Let's get to the place of where he's actually walking and we got nothing for him, right? Before we arrive at that, in that spot of it. So that's where I stand with it. Long answer there. Sorry, but that is where I'm at with the two feed me. So if it's got to be done, it's got to be done. If that's what it takes to get the tumor, to get the tumor out of there. That's not a tumor. Appreciate you feeding me.
That's a good one.
Oh, it's great. Kindergarten Cop classic Arnold, low key classic Arnold. How many people reference that one?
Yeah.
Feed me with another $2 donation. Says, did you guys think John will override Adams like Russ? Okay, so he's saying, well, you think? Let me elaborate a little bit. So what Feed Me saying is, do you think that John Schneider will override Coach Carroll in saying, I'm getting out, Adams is out the door, like he did with Russell Wilson, like you've talked about, where Carroll wanted Russell still? Will he do that here?
I mean, in my mind, there's no decision to make, right? Like, if Pete is not on board with releasing Adams after this season, then he's even more hopeless than I thought. Like, this is not a hard. This should be the easiest decision this offseason. It's like, I've been watching a lot of financial audit episodes on YouTube lately, and it has this guy trying to build budgets for these people who are deep in debt and their financial situation's a mess. And he goes through their like credit card statements for the last month, and it's like twice a day they're going out to eat fast food, and he's like, okay, you need to cut this stuff out. And some of these people are like, do I really have to? Like, that's the easy stuff to cut out. That's the easy stuff to understand. If I can't even get you to understand that you need to stop eating Chick-fil-A twice a day, then you're never going to be able to build a functional budget. If I can't get my head coach to understand that my $28 million safety, who can't really play football anymore, needs to be off this team, there's no hope.
I agree. I've had. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. My bad.
But my point is, like, it shouldn't come down to this. There should be no overriding, because there are people on Twitter, I know many of them, who are big Jamal Adams defenders. They swear he's having a really good season. They think he's great. They think he's so much better than Julian Love. They think he does their great job. They post all these like clips and advanced metrics saying, actually, Jamal Adams is the third best when you put him in. It's like this absolute galaxy brain stuff trying to justify Jamal Adams being some great player. Even they want to cut Jamal Adams. Even they're like, this is not worth the money. So there should be no decision to make.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. I mean, hell, my brother Jamal's his favorite player. He was celebrating like he was having another baby when we learned that we were getting Adams, and he's gotten to that point as well where he's like, yeah, it's that we can't. This isn't working. We can't make this go. And I agree with you that if Carroll's on the spot of going in and saying, I want to die in the trench of Adams and keeping him here, John. No, John, we got to. And understanding as well that Pete's got to be very well aware of where they're at in a cap situation standpoint. You're right. I mean, you talk about right now having a lot of faith in that situation with where we stand with Carroll. You talk about something that would kind of just demolish whatever remnants there might be, that this would do it. This is a move that has to be done. If competition's truly king, if, not just having guys you allow on the roster because you've got the investment put in, but that they're the right guy to be on the roster, that they're going to be a good player for you in the future. If that's what's riding your philosophy and driving your philosophy, then this has got to go down. And I think Carroll was just trying to do the thing where he was just doing the good PR thing the other day by mentioning it, and they'll come down to it and they'll go, well, he'll say later, it was like, well, we were just in a cap situation. It wasn't about him as a player. It wasn't about this. What he'll say, Brendan, he'll be like, well, it wasn't him about, next year he's going to get back on his feet. And it was just about us. We got ourselves into a tough cap situation and we had to save some money. So it's not about him as a player, but it's got to go down this way. You save way too much money on this year's cap that could be used in other vital areas by moving on from Adams.
Yeah. Should be a no-brainer. And I imagine that there would be some intervention if Pete doesn't want to do it. I imagine that somebody would step in and be like, Pete, you don't get to make this call, just like he didn't get to make the Russ call.
Mhm.
But it shouldn't come to that. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't, and it shouldn't, and we'll see. It will Adams can't be on the roster next year. There's just no way about it. You look at the cap situation, you look at how they need to create cap, and I'm not talking about to go make splashy signings, just to do your normal business on the books this offseason. You've got to move on from Adams. Simply saying, well, no, we'll keep Adams, but we'll cut Quandre, and then we'll cut Brian Monet, and then we'll cut Eskridge, and then that'll be enough money. No, it won't. No, it won't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no other guys. When you look at the roster, they don't have a lot of guys they can restructure and pull through. They can save a little money here, a little money there. But this is the one guy that you can save a substantial amount of money by moving off of this offseason.
Yeah, Adams and Diggs are the big guns.
Yeah, that's $26 million right there between two guys. That's a lot of cheese to go out there and get some other things done on this football team for improvement. And I just can't think John Schneider's not sitting there looking at those numbers and going, yeah, that's the spot he'd circle on his paper and go, right, here's where we're going to have to do this, like it or not,
Yeah.
Thank you, Femi, for the double dono. Holy Hand Grenade, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, is Pete being turned out?
Does he mean tuned out?
Okay. I read that pure the other straight away. So I was going, wait, like, is Jody having him turned out, you mean? Because I understand that phrase to mean something completely different. But let's go with I think how you said it was how he meant it. Maybe it's a little bit of a Freudian slip on Holy Hand Grenade's part. But is he being tuned out, Brendan? Have the players checked out of the Pete experience?
I think he has to be. What else could be going on right here? What else could it possibly be to come up with that effort in a game with the playoffs on the line? Like, I know Pittsburgh's not a bad team, by the way, but you're at home. You're playing a third-string quarterback. You're playing a very flawed team that has some real injuries on. Like their defense is good, but they were missing two of their key players, Landon Roberts and Minkah Fitzpatrick. You should win that game, and the fact that you basically no-showed it on defense, I don't know how you can possibly argue anything else.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's happened a few times over the last couple of years. It's with the Rams game in the first game of the season where he's openly admitted I didn't have the team ready to play. And, there's a lot of evidence to this, the lack of tackling, and players themselves. This isn't from me as a fan, but just what players themselves will say is, tackling is about effort. It's about willingness and want. And then that's about a coach getting you to the state of mind, or knowing he's got the players on his roster who can get to that state of the mind on their own if he doesn't have to be the driver of it, who will give that to you every single week. And so if you're not getting that and you thought you were going to get it, or the player once did it at one other place, but he's not doing it here now, it does then seem like, logically speaking, that comes to a tuned out thing going on here where they're just, and I've come back to thinking that's occurring. And again, this is a guess, but I think that that's occurring because the players aren't buying into a scheme that they don't think works. If you want a player to run your scheme, they got to think it works. And you can tell them, no, it works. I promise you it works. But if they watch it out on the field getting exploited time and time again, how is it not going to be human nature of a player to eventually get through a long season or a long couple of years playing for that same coach, watching those same issues present themselves and not saying, well, you know what? It just doesn't work. And I wonder that on this. You're muted.
Yeah, looking back at it, I remember saying, like, the fact that we beat Philly and beat Tennessee proved that we hadn't quit on Carroll as a team. And now we're looking at it, I'm like, man, that Philly team is really bad. That Tennessee team was in a really bad state. Maybe, like, there are a few players on this team that haven't quit, like Geno, like Metcalf. Maybe there are some guys who are locked in, but there are a lot of guys who aren't.
Yeah.
And mostly guys on the defense, which is why we don't tackle, which is why we don't maintain our run gaps, our run game discipline. That's why these teams run all over us despite having backup quarterbacks in.
Amen. Amen. I think it certainly is proof positive that. And if it's not that, then what's the other explanation, Brendan, right? Like, if it's not that, then what is it? All these guys going bad at the same time, which is kind of where they have to go with it. It all then becomes on the player of just the players suck across the board. That's just it. And I don't buy into that. I'm not saying that we have some super championship team, but this is a team that has underachieved. This is a team that hasn't in full performed up to the talent that they put out on the football field, in my opinion, this year.
Yeah.
And that's coaching.
Right.
Thank you, Hand Grenade. Appreciate you for that. By the way, he says here, it auto-corrected. I meant tuned. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. You almost made me answer that question in a weird way there for a second, the way you had it phrased prior.
Right.
I was like, you mean it's Saturday night? You mean like he's on the streets? Like the streets got him?
I'm sure he saved his money well over the years. He doesn't have
I
to
would
worry
hope.
about that.
I'd hope not. I hope he's not out there on Aurora Avenue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hope he's not. Jordan, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that. Jordan says, I'm starting to think that the people that want Geno gone are the same people that are still defending Pete. Ooh, very interesting. I think there might be something, a little bit something to this, actually.
That's not really what I'm seeing.
Okay.
I think the Venn diagram is all over the place. I don't think there's a lot of rhyme or reason to it.
That's a good point.
Honestly, most of the people I see that like Pete also really like Geno. Like that's been my experience. So I don't really agree with that. I think that the people who want Geno gone tend to be the people who want everything gone. Like they just want a massive amount of change. They want something different. And that includes the quarterback, but it also includes the head coach. So I don't know if I've seen that.
I have felt it a little bit on my end. And let me give you an example, Brendan, what I mean on this, where it will come back to the comments I'll get or people that'll bring up to me that, well, the defense didn't perform well today because Geno didn't get his thing done. Well, the defense is on the field so long and getting worn out, and that's why they're not as good. But that's because the offense isn't getting their job. So then it's back to Waldron and Geno. So for instance, this last week with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I had a comment just today I was reading about that was, no one's given any point of mind to Geno Smith and that fumble at the end of the game. That's really, what lost you the game. And in a little bit of the interactions on that, there's nothing really coming back to Pete and the defense on that. So that's where sometimes I do, like you say, it's a Venn diagram. It's like it goes in every different direction. And the Hawks fan base is certainly split and has branches going every which way right now. And no, there's not necessarily one group think of what everyone's outlook on what's best for this team and where they're at in the state. I mean, all across the board, I would agree with that. But I do feel like I gotten a little bit of well, if Geno just ran the offense better, then the defense gets rested and the defense isn't in as much perilous points. And I can see them at times. It feels like cherry picking to the bad spots in Geno's game, even when he's had good games. Like they'll go to even the Dallas game, Brendan, where they'll be like, well, if you could just get one more drive done in there, just couldn't get that one more drive. And it's like, you're muted.
Yeah, and then our defense gives it right back.
Right.
We all know would have happened, whether or not we're willing to admit it.
Agreed. But that's where I'm wondering if, when Jordan's point, there's a little bit of, I sense that too, in that there's not everybody again, and there's different camps on this, but that there's certainly to be a little bit of maybe at least a tiny camp there that puts those two connections together where Geno's got to be going or it's otherwise a Pete. I feel like Geno just, the lack of benefit of the doubt he's gotten at times over the recent years for how well he has played. It's not been perfect ball and putting it in the proper tune. I'm not saying he's playing top 5 in the sport. So like Brendan said, you're paying him to be the 17th highest paid quarterback in the sport. He's giving you beyond that level of performance on the field, bang for buck wise, and easily. And a lot of people can't really see that, or they just get caught too much up in he's just not this answer. He's not the guy. He's not the guy. It's like, but that has nothing to do with where you're getting the bang for the buck. You can go draft your guy, have him sit behind him, and you're doing just fine at the spot. There seems to be a lot of want and quick to throw shade over at Geno and get him out of here as fast as possible for some. And I don't quite get that, because I feel like he played some pretty good football, not always had the easiest of circumstances that he's had working for him over the past 2 years.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if you've seen, but over the last, 3 games he's played, over the last 5 weeks, because he missed 2 games, over the last 5 weeks, he leads the entire NFL in QBR.
When you need it, when the season's on the line, when you have no room for air left, when you're needing these kind of performances, he's providing you that. Like he has Brendan in these games when they've wound down and you've needed him to step up at the end of games. He's being clutch, has been clutch, but another part that just doesn't oftentimes, to me, being given the kind of proper kudos and respect from the fan base that it really should be, in my opinion. which is tough to see. But maybe I'll win him over next year if he comes back. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, I don't want Darrell Taylor next year. He is complete trash. You done with the Taylor experience? You ready to just cut bait?
We're going to be $2 million. He's worth $2 million.
Is he?
Yes.
Is he?
He is. Yes.
No.
He's worth $2 million. He's definitely worth $2 million. I mean, like, if you don't bring him back, you're looking at drafting somebody, because signing somebody would cost more than $2 million. So you then now have to spend a pick on an edge player. Is that edge player going to be? Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I $2 million. I do that all day.
If I could go out there and get a guy for $3.5 million that can play both a little bit of run, a little bit of pass, gives you a 6-7 sack upside to him, and you got to spend $1.5 million more to get that as your fourth edge, would you take that role, or would you go back to Taylor at 2?
I don't think you're going to be able to find a guy at that price that produces like that. I don't think so. Those edge rushers are expensive.
They are, but there's sometimes the value to be found out there too, especially as you get into the third wave of free agency and the money's been bought up and there's still a guy out there. Sometimes you can get, it's like, he's a veteran guy. He's long in the tooth. He can't be played 50, 60 snaps a game. But if you talk about him being your fourth edge, he starts a couple games a season due to injury if he has to, but he plays his rotational snaps. I feel like you could find a guy out there at that price. Maybe it costs you 4, but I think that to Feed Me's point, I can't roll with Taylor anymore. I don't really feel what he's bringing on the football field. I feel like even as a pass rusher, he's not taking steps forward in his game. He's exactly what he was when he walked in the door. I don't know what the upside for him. He's not going to give you anything as a run defender. And when I say anything, I mean, he's going to get attacked when he's on the football field in the ground game. And that's what he brings to the field on a weekly basis, is a guy that's going to be a bleeding hole for you on that spot of the field in the ground game. You're going to watch it this week. The Cardinals are going to attack it when he's out there. And I don't know. I just don't know what he provides really at this point. I don't even think he's all that efficient of a pass rusher, which was his whole thing last year, was he was super efficient, maybe our most efficient pass rusher last year. And he's lost that this season. What has he got?
Yeah.
3, like a handful of sacks.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to think about this here. Like, next year we get Nwosu back. Mafe is clearly the number 2 behind Nwosu, or maybe they're 1A, 1B at that point. Right. You hope that Derek Hall takes another step up. Very likely that he does, by the way, if you look at the history, which we've done a couple times on this show. So at that point, Darrell Taylor is your number 4. You're not asking him to do that much as the number 4.
You're not. But that's my whole point on it, is that he's not even capable of doing that little bit that you're going to be asking of him. You know, last year with his 73 grade pass rush and being that efficient pass rusher, which was his only good grade from last year, he was a 39 run defense grade. He was a 41 tackle grade. But if you look at the previous year in 2021, or you look at this year, he's not that guy. And this year it's actually gone backwards. He's going to probably have more, or be very close to about the most snaps he's played in his entire career this season. Yet the year he had the most hits was his rookie year. Or the most hurries was his rookie year. The most hits he had was his rookie year. Looking at 5 sacks, 3 hits, 17 hurries. His rookie year, he had 7 sacks, 8 hits, and 21 hurries. You know, it's like there's no progression here. There's no, where are the forward steps from Darrell Taylor right now? And
I mean, I've given up on that. There's no more forward stuff with him. He's capped out.
In my opinion, too, though, that this has taught us the last 2 years on this, Brendan, and what we've seen very clearly on this is that fourth rusher can't just be it's a fourth rusher. When are you going to need that guy? Last couple of years, we've needed that guy quite a bit of the time. And it's been a problematic area for us when we've not been able to call upon the fourth guy off the bench who can get the job done. That's my thing with it. Is, a big part of what I like to be driven by is that mistakes come up. Do you deal with those mistakes? Do you deal with things that have been problems, or do you continue to let them replay themselves the next season? And if you're going to run Darrell Taylor back out there, all you're doing is replicating the same issue that's now shown up over the past couple of years with him as a football player. And I don't think that there's any reason to be optimistic there that the light suddenly goes on this one. I would much more be in favor of you just move on. And if you got to spend a little bit extra money to make sure you reinforce the ranks, we would have been better this year going with Bruce Irvin and moving on from Darrell Taylor. He would have been a better player for us this year than what we've gotten out of Taylor. And when you're at that bottom bargain basement low, it now becomes about this thing, Brendan, of, well, he's a former second round pick. So you got, no, this is where we got to get to, I think, as an organizational point, is that, hey, the guy ain't bringing it. He's out. If Eskridge ain't bringing it, he ain't bringing it. I don't care if he's a second round pick. He's out. You got to have people in the building that are actually bringing forward momentum and adding to the cause rather than subtracting from it, which he feels to me like a negative at this point as a player.
Yeah, I mean, the last month he's been completely useless. Before that, though, he actually had the month before the current month.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually producing a good amount of pressures.
Well, that's what he does. That's what he does, though. And then that's what he does with his year. First year, he was, remember that first season he had 2021 after he came off the leg injury. He had the 5-game run, and then he went completely silent. Last year, he was completely silent and then turned it on through like the back 6 games of the season to make his season look a lot better. And now again this year, we're saying that same inconsistency, where it's like if you go down the board on this guy as a player, he is what he was when he walked in the door, and he's not progressed so. And if that's the case, there's no hope for him to then progress next year, absent just blindly hoping, well, fourth year, something will happen then at that point. I mean, magically. I don't think we should count on magic to happen with this. I think that he just is what he is.
I mean, it really depends on what we could replace him with and how much that replacement would cost. Like, I'm still inclined to believe he's worth $2 million. But if you can replace him without spending an order of magnitude more money, then sure, of course.
Yeah. And I'm not advocating for spending a lot more money, and certainly you probably can't afford to do so. But I looking through the years, it always seems like there's that 32, 33-year-old rusher, all like the Bruce Irvin we had, who's in that spot there, who's still got a little bit that they can play. As long as you keep them contained in their snap count and try to not to use them too much, you can make them work for that snap count. And they can give you some effectiveness with that, right? They understand, hey, I can rev the motor up high and I can give you a lot on these little bit of plays you put me out there. I feel like there's a collection of those guys throughout. You don't have to pay them a lot. You give them a little bit more than the base salary, a little bit more than veteran minimum, and you can bring them into the stables and they can provide, on top of providing a little bit of a veteran component too with this, Brendan, because he's not he's not teaching anybody anything. At least I bring another veteran and he can help out some of these young pass rushers to take some steps forward in their development. But yeah, I'm definitely out on Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely ready to move off him as soon as it's, going to be prohibitively expensive to keep him, but I do think he is worth $2 million, even if we might be able to do better.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point. Corey Olson, thank you for the $5 donation. Says, Field Diggs checked out a while ago. No way he dropped off this fast in talent. In his last presser last season, I believe he was saying we got out schemed.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of Diggs, man. I don't know. I know he made a Pro Bowl alternate today or yesterday. And I know there are some people that really defend him, but you can't tell me he's worth this money.
Yeah, I think with Diggs, it is a little bit more it's way more complicated than Adams, how you kind of arrive at the place of saying that most likely the best route to go here, Corey, is to say, we've got to just move on this. It's as much about, hey, the $50 million safety experiment that we tried isn't working. The other thing is that if you're going to pay a guy this amount of money and then ask him to just be in single high center field, 40 yards deep off of the line of scrimmage on just about every single play, well, are you really then getting the most of, again, back to bang for your buck for that? Can you not find a guy out there that can just stay over the top as a super fast free safety back there with some ball skills, that's all you're asking them to do for a much cheaper rate? I would kind of think so. Maybe I'm off my marker on this one, but I just feel like that's a lot to pay top 10 safety money for a guy that doesn't really make a lot of plays, who's a negative as a tackler, and who stands off the ball 40, 50 yards most of the time. It seems to me like what makes more sense to me on this, Brendan, is like when I hear the rest of the NFL devaluing safeties across the board or free safeties like this, I go, yeah, if I'm a team that's got my safety back there 50 yards off the ball, not impacting the play more often than not, I'm not going to pay him a whole hell of a lot of money. I'm going to try to avoid not paying that guy a lot, right? It kind of adds up, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it make sense to you in that way? Like, I mean, it's one thing if he's coming up and doing a variety of things and he's bouncing here, bouncing there, and you got him in the flat, you got him blitzing, you got him come up and actually being a true defender in the ground game. But if you're not having him do that, you don't need to be paying him this money. And then, you add on top of it, like Corey says, I've had a lot of fans ask me, is Diggs really in? Is he really tuned into what's going on right now? Maybe he's not making, he's had some games, he's laid some hits. A couple weeks ago, he was smacking Titans all over the football field. But then, he's also had some games where it's just, you're wondering a little bit too on some of the effort when he's coming up. And he's got the moment that stands out to me in that Niner game where you got poor Witherspoon there, Brendan, just holding onto the waist. And here comes Trey Brown up, and then Woolen knocks Trey Brown off the tackle and Witherspoon off. And then here comes Quandre taking this like fortuitous circle route around the whole play, where to me it was completely a play that felt to me like a defender who was trying to like make it look like he was coming in to be in on the play, but finding his way to stay around contact when you needed him to come in there and help make the tackle. And I have nothing. I like a lot of what Quandre does bring to the field, but the bottom line is that I think his best days have been had here. I don't think we utilize him at the most to be paying him what we are. And I think that we could save $26 million by those two guys and roll that money into other places on this team that have been neglected and not been given that same kind of, what's the word I'm thinking, investment. I think we're going to get a better team because of it. The bottom line is there'll be a better team out on the other end of that because of that. And that's not shade to Jamal or Quandre. That's just the better way to put resources in this modern NFL than dropping it into a position that's been devalued as much as running back, if not more so.
Yeah. I think that's also kind of a no-brainer at this point. I know it's not as much of a no-brainer as Jamal, but I also feel like it's a clear decision that needs to be made because to me, the only reason why it's controversial at all is because you restructured him this offseason.
Yeah. And I just think it is, like I say, it's a different than the Jamal, but it's no more or less the no-brainer. I think this team has got to take the bad money off the books, and not just bad money because the player's not good, but because we got to utilize what's best for the scheme. You know, if we're going to marry back in, or Coach Carroll doesn't want to run blitzes and he wants to run soft zone and he wants to trust the front four, then guess what? We got to bring a lethal front four to play, not the back end. The back end's nice to have at that point, but you got to have the front four then so that you're not just holding on in coverage 5, 6, 7 seconds downfield because nobody can get home, as we've seen time and time again this year. So this seems to be a pretty straightforward decision for me on both camps with this, Brendan, but you never can tell with this team in certain points. They may want to try to keep at least one.
Yeah. I get it. And I understand that we have a coach that isn't going to be interested in, throwing away a season, which it would kind of feel like you are. I don't think it is. But if you do cut Adams, Diggs, Love, Dre'mont, Ballore, Monet, if you do move off all those guys, it is going to kind of feel like spring cleaning. And you're going to feel like, yeah, we're not really going to compete this year. But I think you could. I don't think it's unreasonable. You're going to create so much cap space, even though if there is quite a bit of dead money to eat as well.
I think you could if you kept, especially, I think Dre'mont and Julian can stay on the roster because the savings aren't so substantial that it's as much a no-brainer. And all those guys you talked about, I mean, just take the 4 guys we're going to stand on that we feel pretty confident in. Jamal, 16. Adams adds another 10 to 26. You save about 6-ish on Monet. So that puts you to 32. And then I think you're about $2 million on Eskridge. So you're $34 million between those guys. You could keep Love. You've got Kobe Bryant. You've got Jarek Reed coming back. You're going to maybe need to draft another guy, but you got a mix of guys then at that point. And now you can take that investment through into middle linebacker and into your front 7, maybe offensive line. I think you could still compete at that point, Brendan. I think it's really the problem here has just been sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say there is kind of the nuclear option. You can extend Geno to create cap space.
You could, which again, I don't mind because I still don't think that precludes you from going out there and drafting the quarterback who, you're going to reach, you take it to, you get a year down the line and Geno's, still balling out, but then the guy's ready to come out there and play. Well, does Geno become a trade asset at that point? A guy that you could move if you wanted. There's some ways that could be wins in that, even if you did go that route. So I'm okay with them doing that as well, Brendan. I think that those people are going to we'll have a happier fan base when we got that quarterback waiting in the wings, right? Even if Geno's on the roster, I think that'll settle a lot of people down with the QB position, just having at least a guy there that they can be thinking about as the next one.
Right. Exactly. Nothing wrong with that.
Feed Me More Seahawks off topic. When is the next members only stream? We're going to do a Saturday stream this week, I think, Feed Me. I'm either it might be tomorrow, but I think I'm probably going to do a Saturday. So we'll go probably Saturday afternoon and I will get that scheduled up. So we're going to probably do a Hawks Nest members only call-in show on Saturday. And I'm going to lean to probably doing it around maybe midday-ish or so. So if you're a member of the channel, keep an eye out for your community posts. I'll be putting a link out there to that. And we'll be hearing from our fellow 12s on what they think and what's going on with this year and where they're at with it. So probably Saturday. I'll try to get that out tomorrow for a show link on the community post for members of the channel.
All right. Cool.
Thank you, Femi. Appreciate you for that. And thanks for all the donations today. Well, we've got this broken down, I think, pretty good as a matchup. Both special teams are pretty solid. Cardinals special team is solid. I think we've got maybe a minor edge there a little bit, but I don't know if a major, huge, massive edge.
I doubt it decides the game.
He decides the game. I think we've got the points of emphasis probably from what I've gotten from you, and correct me if I'm off on this. I never like to speak for you if I'm being inaccurate, of course. But that we stop in the runs where this game starts at, probably first and foremost.
Right? In theory, but we know that the last 2 games we played, Pete Carroll focused on stopping the big play. I don't know why that would change this week. If you're going to do it against Mason Rudolph and Ryan Tannehill, you're probably going to do it against everybody.
That's well played, sir. Well played. Yeah, that's true. We did do that. Oh my God. It brought me back when he said that. Did it not bring back memories to you of Buffalo a couple years ago?
Yeah, it did.
Like, you go, dude. We're so worried about that Buffalo Bill ground attack.
Yeah, like, can you at least make sense? Like, okay, we're going to lose sometimes. Can you at least make sense? Can you at least say something? Yeah, there were some people on Twitter earlier today who theorized that he said that to cover for his players, to try to take the blame for their shortcomings because, they weren't giving any effort and he was trying to find some way to deflect it back to him.
It's a hell of a sword to fall on. It's a hell of a sword to fall on because, there's people questioning you right now. If I'm Carroll right now, I'm like, if there's some things that I'm doing right and then my players are doing wrong, like, I don't mind you telling us what's what here. I honestly like him, even when he airs out like public names and stuff like that. I know it's a bad look and coaches shouldn't be doing that to a degree, but like, we're kind of needing answers as a fan base here too. And the reporters aren't asking it. And we don't really get the forthright nature from you always on this stuff, Carol. And really what the bottom line here is in the background of what's happening here. So I do at least like that because it is oftentimes just kind of, I'm not sure of what we're seeing really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
So at least by our stance, maybe not the team stance, Brandon, but by your and my stance, sorry about that. By your and my stance of things, we look at this as being one where this has got to be a game where we start with stopping the run, tackling, keeping our gap integrity on point. The Cardinals going to challenge it across the board from James Conner. We didn't talk about the 2 other guys, but Rondale Moore, they've utilized as a running back now as much as a receiver. That DeMarcado guy, Mario DeMarcado, is a pretty fun little back there as well. So they can kind of run waves at you a little bit here in the ground game. But for me, at least, stopping the runs where I've got to start with if I was the head coach of this team. How about you? Would you be in that same place?
Seems like a no-brainer. Seems like a pretty obvious thing that you got to do. So, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. If you stop the run, I don't know what this Cardinals team can even really do. Like, they don't even have Hollywood Brown, right? He's out.
Nope. He's out.
They've got McBride, and that's like their only big threat.
It is indeed. That's pretty much it. Rondell can do some stuff for them, but there's not really anything else that they've got that's really going to hammer you. So to me, you stop the run game, you come out as far as offensively and understand that we've got to be explosive. Let's attack in the passing game. Let's test their secondary out. Let's see if we can find some holes out there. Let's get some more of attack in the middle of the field, which we've done in recent weeks. More of DK Metcalf in the slot, more of DK Metcalf running posts and slants out of the slot in order to kind of manufacture some touches into him, even maybe back to Noah Fant on some of the seam stuff they were doing last week a little bit. I think that if we go down to just 2 real parameters in this game, Brennan, sometimes some games require 5 or 6 parameters, but in this one, because you are so much better talented wise, I think this one does get really pretty simple when we get down to the bottom line for me on that. Do those 2 things beyond turnovers, right? Sometimes I'd say turnovers, turnovers could factor in, but I'd say even more in turnovers. I go, nope. These 2 things, you take care of business and you're efficient and explosive from passing attack wise, and you stop the running game. I think you can win. I think you win this football game, and I think you win it going away.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, I'm not entirely convinced that they will be able to do that, but I do agree that if they do, there isn't much else to say.
So that takes us then the bottom line on this is that what you phrase, that's right. This is what they should do does not necessarily mean that is what they will do. how does this game play out in your eyes, where this team is at in the season, and then what's the final score?
I don't think we're going to be able to stop the run because they've given me no reason to believe over the last 2 months now that they're able to stop the run. So I think they do run on us. I think it limits the issues that their lackluster receiver core raises. I know they don't have a very good offensive line, and it's going to be even a little more beat up than usual because they're not going to have Humphreys and they may not have Wilkinson. So that's a big part of their offensive line. I don't know if we're equipped to take advantage of that. So I think it's going to be a shootout. I do think our offense is up to keep up, but I'm also looking at this factor that I think the Cardinals are playing harder for Jonathan Gannon than the Seahawks are playing for Pete Carroll. So I'm going to go with like 30-24 Cardinals.
Succinctly put, and well put on your part. I can't really push back against any of the things you say and say, well, I can counter this with that. I can't. I can only go to the fact that I got to feel like at one point or another, some point of desperation hits in with this team, and that this is their final chance to control their chance in a year where they've had so many of those chances slip through their fingers, that I've got to feel like they come in and maybe just one for the old Gipper kind of thing, right? Maybe just maybe one of those things going on, and they just find a way to get it done. It ain't going to be pretty. It's going to be a slog. It's going to at times have some of the painful points of the season that like they've been in some of these games to watch, but we still end up coming out the other side of it. I'm going to say with a 27-24 game on Jason Myers, fourth quarter comeback by Geno Smith, where they got to come back down from 10 points down, and puts the field goal up through the uprights to give them the win. And I see it going like that. That's where I see it going. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be clear. I do want to win this game. I'm not.
Oh yeah,
I'm not interested in like, oh, let's get a slightly higher draft pick. I think that's such a waste of time. I think that kind of stuff, waste of
no,
time.
no, you want this team to win, Brendan, and you analyze this team and you're looking at it through what you've seen through this year, and they've told you a story, and I can't argue with the story they've told you coming into this. Part of my outlook for seeing this win is, quite frankly, just kind of hoping on a star, wishing on a star, because everything this team's told me about going into this kind of game with a team that's going to play hard against you, who can run the ball, who has a mobile quarterback, who can scramble for some free and easy yards at times. That's a formula that's trying and tough, and that we've had a hard time dealing with, not just this year but in recent years. So for it to come to that spot as a final score, I don't think is out of pocket at all, and it fits in line with where this team's been at.
Right.
I hate saying
Absolutely.
that. I hate saying it, man, but it is what it is. John M429, thank you for the $10 donation. It says, thoughts on Andy Dickerson. Do our O-line problems stem from coaching or youth? I know injuries have been a factor all year long, but I still wonder. I hate the run game. Maybe we need to draft more guys. We were just having a discussion about this a couple of days ago in regards to the
Yeah.
line.
I don't have a problem with Dickerson. I think the injuries to the offensive line this year were impossible to overcome. And I think
Mm.
he did the best that he could in some games this year. Like, for all of the problems, we have an average NFL offense with a god awful offensive line. He has done something right. Like, he got decent play. Like, this is by far the best Stone Forsythe has ever looked.
Oh yeah.
We've
Yeah.
gotten good mileage. We've gotten passable mileage out of like Bradford, who has no business playing in the NFL right now.
It's true.
So I'm not upset at Dickerson. I think that he just got dealt a really bad hand this year.
Yeah, I feel the way Brendan does. Brendan, would you buy if I was to say, I don't have the data to back this up, of course, but if I was to tell you that Hawks probably offensive line has lost more guys to starters lost to injury than anything but maybe two or three other NFL teams, would you buy that probably being the case?
Mm.
It feels like that
Yeah,
to me.
yeah. I mean, like the Giants had it really bad, right? Because
Mhm.
they lost. Who's their left tackle? Who's their big expensive left tackle?
Thomas
Thomas. Yeah,
and
Andrew Thomas. I think John Michael Schmitz has gotten hurt. I think Lewinsky got hurt. So it's us and the Giants, and I don't know who else.
yeah. And I think that's a part to me, John, that I look at that can't be undersold is you have that many injuries and that much of a rotating basis. It makes it hard on Dickerson in his job to show you that to be him to be at his best for a team like Philadelphia that's got their full set of linemen running pretty much all year long. I think Dickerson has done a pretty good job, John. I think the big problem that stands out to me with him when you brought him in was that 2 years ago, you brought this new offensive lineman coach in to get you, and then with him, you need to bring in mobile offensive linemen, guys that could move in space to get this done. And not only guys that could move in space, but talented guys that could move in space. And instead, Phil Haynes, Damian Lewis, those are guys that were here under the old regime, that they fit to the old player model. So you've kind of forced them to fit into Dickerson's scheme when they have. And on top of the fact, you moved both of them from their prior positions that they played in college and that caused you to draft them in the first place for that position. So they very well could both be playing kind of out of their really natural position for them. And Evan Brown, you spent $2 million for your starting center this year, and he's playing like a back end center in the National Football League. So that doesn't
We
come
got our
back.
money's worth. We got our money's worth.
Yeah, we got our money's worth. Exactly.
It's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing, but that's also, I can't throw, chicken crap at Dickerson and say, make chicken soup. If I want him to make me a good soup, I got to give him some good ingredients to work with. And that's why I've said, to me, John, at the forefront of what I hold as the priority this offseason for what they need to do from a roster building standpoint, it's the investment into the offensive line. True investment, not the partial investment, not just a spot here or there. Sorry, I thought I had that off. Not just a spot here or there, but all across the board. And unfortunately, they just haven't done that for a very long period of time, John. We were talking a couple days ago on our Tuesday show. When you look at the actual top of the end investments for John Schneider and Coach Carroll for a 12-year period here, it's really not that much in the draft as far as the top end that they've put into it. It's really been something that they've always kind of just begrudgingly gone out there and picked a guy high when they absolutely really have to do so, rather than really making it, hey, let's make the offensive line a strength of our team by really drafting and making these guys good across the board. So I'd like to see them change their way with that, John, because like you say, the run game sucks a lot of times because you really on a baseline, just bottom line, yeah, the A and B gap runs and you don't run it outside. You don't use the fly sweep. All that stuff's true. But what's also true is you don't have guys that can move guys off the line. You don't have the guys that can hit the reach blocks and then move the guys out of the holes. And you're having a lot of early penetration, guys not landing their blocks, holes not open for running backs, over and over and over again, play after play. And that's got to be solved to me with a talent, better talent.
Yeah, I agree with all that. More talent.
But he's good. I think he's doing good, John. It makes it hard to evaluate him when you don't actually bring the personnel to fit to the guy's scheme that he wants. And we couldn't have gone from a more different scheme for what we required from offensive linemen under Tom Cable versus what you were supposed to be looking for and wanting under a guy like Dickerson. Or not Cable, but Solari. Sorry. What Solari wanted from his guys versus what Dickerson wants from his guys. Two different things. Two different, very, very different. And we haven't really kind of fully embraced that understanding, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just tried to get away with it for another year. They were like, Damian Lewis was good last year. Yeah, he doesn't fit. But we don't want one more thing to fix this offseason, so let's just roll with this and hope we get away with it, and we didn't.
Agreed. I think it came to us the cost for essentially we're going to go and buy into the offensive line. That's, in the safety position, like we'll put all that investment over there. So you kind of pulled back over here on that side. I felt like on the other side of that, conversely, or attack you a little more the edge, for instance, like you have the past couple of drafts versus looking over there. So, but they need to get after it, Brendan. They really do. Feeding More Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donations. Is at this point, make Spoon captain. Not a lot. Try.
I'm not sure what he's trying to say at the end there.
I'm not sure what you mean at the end there, Feed Me, but I perfectly be good if he wants to become a captain next year. He certainly brings a spirit that you would like other players to exemplify in his example. So, and he was at Illinois.
Yeah, I could get behind that. I can go for that.
I'm worth it. It's hard for young guys to do it, but if you're going to bring that kind of energy and play with that kind of fire and passion, guys will rally around you. Mm-hmm. Cameron, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, I'm really worried that if we miss the playoffs, Pete will fire Waldron. I really don't like that. I like Waldron and what he's doing.
I do. I mean, at this point, doesn't Hurt have to be the scapegoat?
I would think so, but Brendan, that interview he gave at the start this last week on Monday, and he's leading with like the offense not running the ball as much or getting as many first downs converted, and he starts with the offense, and you're just like, dude, why are you starting with your defense? Let's the tackling, giving up third string quarterback, slicing you and dicing you apart. Like I feel like Pete's a little bit like he's like the parent. He's got the two kids, and there's obviously one child that's going to be favored here between the two. And it's like when you're the Harry Potter and the defense is Dursley, then like you're stuck under you're under the
Yeah.
staircase.
Yeah.
And
What I'm really worried about is that we fire Waldron and we go get somebody who represents a step back from Waldron, because theoretically Waldron was brought in here to at least try to implement some more modern concepts, right? And like I said, this most recent game was mostly really good. We saw some throwing over the middle, we saw running to the outside, we even saw some flood routes. Yeah, if I recall correctly, I saw some flood routes in that game.
yeah,
So I look at that and I go, is he just going to go back to like a Brian Schottenheimer, Daryl Bevel type, somebody who's just going to run some 1970s offense? Like, is he going to say, that's the problem? The problem is I tried to be more like the Rams. No, I need to be more like the 1980s Jets or something.
well,
That's what I'm afraid of.
if there's a coach out there who doubles down back on his base philosophy and is not a guy that likes to change, it certainly is a Coach Carroll. That's a bit of his approach. He wants to do it the way he wants to do it. And even when he tries to show you change, you don't necessarily get tangible change. I'd hope, Cameron, that Waldron doesn't become the scapegoat in this situation. He shouldn't be. I don't think that he's necessarily had an amazing year as a play caller. I feel like he is having some of it with one arm tied behind his back, because you can see so much of this offense looking so familiar to what it's looked like in recent history. And in many ways, I do look at the offense in the same way I look at the defense, and that you can roll through here any number of offensive coordinators that you want to run through here. You're going to get the same style of offense on the football field on game days, because Pete is not hands off. He is not a guy that's like, yeah, run your scheme wild and free. And the proof of this is very easy. People can get mad at me saying that, but the proof of this is very easy. Why does Waldron come from a Rams scheme that runs their scheme a certain way, like Brendan just talked about, the flood zone concepts, utilizing the middle of the field, the short and intermediate passing game? Why does he come from a scheme like that to Seattle and stop using most of that Rams playbook and his concepts and what he's bringing to the field here in Seattle? Did he just forget overnight? Did he just wake up with amnesia? Or is it perhaps maybe and especially what doesn't add up on that is that he has the amnesia, and he has the amnesia that then guides him to run an offense that's like the offense we ran through the late teens. That doesn't add up to me. That dog don't hunt. And so
it's not right. It don't make sense.
Right. It's not right. Don't make sense. And so I just think he shouldn't be the scapegoat, but doesn't mean he won't be, Cameron. And doesn't matter when it comes to coordinators, they can flow through as many as they want to flow through, but the bottom line is not going to change until the philosophy and approach of the coach changes. And letting them especially just do their jobs and do it in just full, go wild and free, go crazy with it, and bring out outside ideas inside, rather than bringing in more of the yes men, do what I tell you to do thing.
Correct. Absolutely.
MJ Seahawk, thank you for the $50 donation. This might be on your side because he has been slacking on Brendan's donos. I need to see some personnel changes and some philosophy changes. Gino at best is a 10 win and out in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I must have missed the Seahawks fan meeting that was thrown where that was determined. Like, I don't know. I must have missed the invitation to that meeting, because the way some people talk about Gino, it's like that was determined at some kind of, I don't know, stonecutters meeting, and I just missed it. So I got to get caught up on that.
Absolutely. Well, and MJ, I want to thank you too. You dropped $100 dono, I think, for me last week, a $50 here to Brendan. So thank you for the very kind support. I want to say too to Brendan's intimating a bit on your chat comment is one that we do hear about in the limitations of Gino. And Brendan, let me lead with a little bit of this, and you add on to if I'm misspeaking. I think I think we're really on the same page. And you guys like it when we argue and fight, but this is one where I think we've come here slowly to this process with Gino on this. And this isn't something overnighted. This has been from the interactions we've had and us looking into the deep depths of him, trying to pull to the truth, because there's so much variation of people and what they see as the truth in regards to Gino. you mentioned like last year, MJ Seahawks getting to the playoffs. Get you to the playoffs last year, 6 rookies starting on that team, $50 million of dead money. Get you to the playoffs. He's going on the road against the Niner team that was probably the best team in the NFC last year. He's got you with a lead at halftime, and your defense can't stop a soft breeze in that football game. And eventually, the boys can't score every time on that tough Niner defense, and you lose the game. But then is that an example of Geno failing or his limitation or his top end as a player? Or was that the limitation of the team? And I bring that game up, MJ, because I think that that's a microcosm of this Geno situation. Is the limitation of Geno for why we aren't better offensively or why this team didn't top out better this year? Or is it more about the surrounding cast around him and the decisions being made around him and whatnot on that? And for me, and at least what I believe on Brendan's side of this, my side of this, it's the latter and not the former. And that if you get him an offensive line that's not the worst in football, this offense is going to soar. If you get him a defense that's not one of the worst in football, now he doesn't have to be perfect every time and feel like he's got to score every time. They can stay in the pocket within themselves. They can just be them efficient self. On top of it, they're going to get more bites at the apple because they're not sitting on the sideline for 2/3 of the game while the defense is sitting out on the field allowing third down conversion after third down conversion. So from my standpoint with MJ, I just come back to going, I could maybe come to the place you are with this, he's a 10-win guy out in the first round. That's his ceiling. He's going to bump up his head above that, no further. You can win me to that side of it. And Brendan, sorry for this. I know we're a long way on this, but you win me on the side of it. But what I need to see to make that determination is a functional offensive line, is a functional defense, not a great offensive line, not a great defense, a functional one. Give me middle of the road on both of those. And then Geno topping out at that point, and I'm with you. But he's not gotten either of those two things over the past 2 years, and therefore I can't get to that final conclusion because of that. Where are you at with it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just a simple matter of if we win this weekend, which we're currently favored to do, that's 2 straight 9-win seasons with Geno Smith playing almost every game. He's missed 2.5 games or so this year. With a defense that is going to rank in the bottom quarter of the league, with an offensive line that, I mean, last year it was okay, right? It was like passable. It was
a tale of 2 seasons, right? It was 12 games, and then it was the back end. 12 games, they were really good. They actually were good in both respects of they opened up holes in the ground game, and then they pass protected really pretty well. But then they got to that back half, and it all fell off a cliff, like a cliff. It didn't steadily decline. Tampa Bay game onwards dropped off a cliff last year.
The run game was okay last year. This year, it's not very good. And we're still getting to 9 wins. I don't know why a more stable team would only generate 1 extra win and no further progress in the playoffs. I don't see that. I don't see that at all. And by the way, Geno Smith is one of the few quarterbacks who's playing at this level that will give you the money to do that. These other quarterbacks that play at Geno's level are getting $45, $50, soon $55 million a year. Yeah. They're not going to let you build the way you might need to build to have that high level of play. Even a guy like a Jalen Hurts, who can barely throw the ball 8 yards without it wobbling, got $50 million a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Brock Purdy, who is still very obviously just, a product of the system, when his contract's up, what do you think he's getting? You think he's getting 60? I feel like he is.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He'll have 3 years at that point. He'll have 3 years of not just 1 year off. He'll have given him at that point a 3rd year. So it's like he can come to them and say, "Hey, this ain't a one off. I've given you a couple of years of this kind of play. It's legitimate."
Right. So, yeah, I don't understand this viewpoint at all. The reality is, and I know some Seahawks fans really don't want to accept this, but Geno, even with his slight downtick this year in production, which I think has way more to do with his circumstances than his actual play, is still in that conversation for top 10 quarterback this year. So, partially because quarterback play is down right now, I feel like. But bottom line is, I think you can make a very compelling argument that he's a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah. And if the quarterback plays down, that's also that's where the temperature of the room's currently at and what determines a good quarterback or not a quarterback. And that's always a fluctuating thing potentially year by year, especially considering this year where defenses have seemingly kind of taken offenses that for years have been taking the forward step ahead of them. And they've kind of narrowed the mark a little bit this year versus other years in that's from that stance of things. So
Mhm.
thank you for the $50 donation, MJ. And I
Yes,
want to
thank
say
you.
your
Thank you, MJ.
your outlook on this is not one that you're alone on, and that this is something that me and Brendan we've given. This is something why we're so elaborate in our answers on this one is because we've been given this is kind of a common sentiment quite often throughout the course of not just this year, the past 2 years in this. And so it's required us to look at this as deeply as we possibly can look at this, to consider it in the maximum way. We come out at the end of the conclusion the same place to that after looking through all of that data. And it's that you can bring me to your side of it, but you got to take care of these other little things first, which I think are the big inhibiting factors to getting the most out of Geno, and with it, the most out of this team, to getting it to a place of true contention and elite status.
Right.
But thank you for the big $50 dono. Appreciate you for that, MJ. And the $100 dono last week too, man. You are awesome. Long live the king. Thank you for another $5 donation as well. Says, would you guys be opposed to going all in on the offensive line and defensive line resources, draft-wise and free agency? Extend Geno and then draft a developmental quarterback. What do you think about that approach?
I'm very on board with that. I think that would probably produce the best results long term, short term, and would probably be pretty good long term as well. Like next year, Geno is going to be 32, maybe 34 against the cap if we make the playoffs. So that's reasonable. I still think you're getting your money's worth at 32 million for a season when you compare him to other quarterbacks. But if you could get that number down, you easily could get it down to like 20 million if you extended him out another couple of years. So I would definitely be on board with that, because I have every reason to believe right now that Geno will be good for another couple of years. If we decide we want to go that route, he will be good another couple of years.
Agreed. I think the same thing. And I think that as we talked about on Tuesday, I don't mind the fact, King, if you do extend him a couple of years, that you give that backup quarterback, that youngster, a little bit extra time to develop and get himself really, truly ready to go out there and play versus trying to just throw him in there and expect him to just learn how to swim. So I'm okay with it on that. And as Brendan also said, there's no downside, both short-term and long-term, to investing in the offensive defensive line. It's a good investment in both cases to me. So yes, I am completely there to go in that approach with this. I think that's where we've really been held back as a team outside of, let's say, the schematics and X's and O's, is that the proper investment in the offense and defensive line has been missing for years. So really investing in that would really bring about the best returns. And with Geno, yeah, you could save some money on top of that. I mean, you move on from Jamal, you move on to Quandre, Monet, Eskridge, extend Geno. Suddenly now you've got about $45 million of spendable space out there cap-wise to go make some moves, which would be enough to address both of those if that's where they wanted to laser their focus.
Yep.
Thank you, King, for the double don't know. And I love where you're thinking on that, man. That'd be great if they take that approach. DeBoy with a $2 donation. What's up, DeBoy? It says, does Leonard Williams even want to re-sign with this team? Probably a good question.
Well, what other teams will let you be that bad at tackling on a Sunday and then have the head coach get on the radio on a Tuesday and lead off talking about how he's disappointed in the offense?
That's true. You're getting an umbrella of protection from your coach.
Yeah. I don't think players think about this stuff as much as we sometimes think. I think they want the money. I think they like staying in the same place if they've I read somewhere that Leonard Williams bought a house in the area from Lockett already. He's already kind of rooted down here a little bit.
Whoa. Okay. Let's
go. I don't think players are that wrapped up in this kind of stuff the way we think they might be.
I agree with you. This was a little bit of always my issue at times with the thought process of our culture, and all of that brings free agents to us. Like, they don't really care about those extra millions. They could be paid somewhere else. It's this great culture in Seattle that I want to go play at. And that might be the case with guys that have played here prior, but really pulling in outside free agents in and players that have been here. I don't know that that's really the bottom line. Is money talks, right? And, if you offer him the deal that's the best deal or near the best deal he's getting, he's probably likely to resign here. And if you try to undersell him or give him millions less, he's probably not likely to sign here. And it's just as much as that might come down to be the bottom line. I think you can move a little bit to the other side of it versus like, he wants to be a West Coast guy versus being forced to be out on the East Coast. So that wins a little bit in your favor to a degree, but it's a small degree. It's not the major impactful part of the deal of whether it gets done or not. And I think the team's going to want to, I think with that second round pick hanging a bit over the side of this, they're going to want to re-sign him here. They're going to want to get him on a deal. And he's been a really good player for them since he's come in. The one thing you could say to him too, Du Bois, is that, over there with the Giants and the scheme he was running in, which is that blitz heavy scheme where you're allotted to kind of your role you've got to fit into. And that time, that doesn't always give those pass rushers the freedom inside to do what they want to do, to go get to the quarterback and have penetration. Statistically speaking, PFF score wise, he's been better here than what he was with the Giants. They've utilized his skill set, you could say, at a little bit more of a maximum level, even though, again, I know the bottom line on the team defense hasn't been there, Du Bois, but that might be something that he also thinks about too. It's like, well, this scheme better fits what I do. I get to just be a 3-tech that gets to go hunt.
For whatever it's worth, the 2024 franchise tag amount for a defensive lineman is going to be just shy of 20 million.
He's been done twice.
Really?
So
does that count even if he's gone to another team?
Yeah, it factors in.
Okay, I was wondering if maybe that would come into play here. Okay.
I
was going to say he would not want to play that game.
I looked into it after the trade to just see that, because that was the first thing that jumped to me too. I was like, well, wait, what if we do this? But we can't get cute with it because it tripled. You know how it goes with that. I think it's 20% more than the cap is at for the franchise when they're in the third year, I think. So it's like the cap cost plus the 20%. So you're up at paying them $27 million a year on a 1-year deal or something, $30 million a year, which you don't want to do that. But we'll see how it goes. I think that's interesting to hear about that. That's a nice little nugget you just dropped. You waited 2 hours to drop that little nugget there, Brendan, with the lock at home sale. I like that, man. Saving the nuggets to spread them out throughout the show. I dig that.
And I'm sure it's not the hardest thing in the world for him to sell the house and go to another one, but it does indicate some desire to stay here.
It does, especially in this real estate market that seems in a weird potential fluctuating state. You never know with that. But I think he will, Du Bois. We'll see how it goes. That answer will be answered probably pretty soon as we get in the offseason one way or the other. But he'll be definitely a guy they're trying to sign before free agency hits, I imagine. And so we'll learn before then. MJ Seahawk, thank you for another $10 donation. Appreciate you for that. It says, sorry, I meant without some major changes to the philosophy and personnel. Coaching, O-line, and D-line, Geno can't win more than 10, and we won't make it past the first round. Oh, okay. That
I
makes
can
a
get
little
behind
bit more
that. I can get behind that.
I'm with you on that, then, MJ Seahawk. I certainly feel like philosophy and how the way we run the team from the personnel, both sides of the ball, and some of the restrictions that are seeming in place. It's kind of like we have bumpers on our car on either side or something a little bit of time. So, that can be the great, I think that is the great inhibiting factor here to this team right now. And that's why I do often go to coaching, but that's within the coaching, of course. So I think that's a very fair point on your part. I would be with you there, that it's this, you could say this coaching is topped out if they're going to remain in their rigid, unchanging, unyieldy approach on both sides of the ball, which just has gotten a bit outdated and stale.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how it gets much better than this right now.
But I appreciate this. MJ Seahawk, thank you for all the donos, man, all the support. $100 drop, $50 drop, $10 drop. Thank you for all those donos. King, you too for feed me. You too, Cameron. Long live the King. Appreciate you guys. All that for the donos on the chat. Do me a favor as well tonight, guys. And if you could hit that like button here on this channel. Get subbed up if you can. Brendan, we're almost on the edge of 15,000 subs here. So I'm trying to cook along to that mark. Please do get subbed up if you're not already as well on that side of things. Well, we've got our, where was your final score again?
30-24.
All right. So Brendan's 30-24. He is certainly a man that has lost his religion. He's lost his religion. He now travels the lands, helping people, getting in adventures.
They're not giving me much to work with.
They're not. I don't blame you. And I'm at times I find myself very close to the edge of that precipice myself, Brendan. So we'll see what they can do this week, man. It's been an up and down year, and it's been some good, some bad, a little bit in between. But we'll find out the final stance on this team this week, Brendan, and what they are and who they are, and the final story of the Hawk season, so to speak. They need to win. They need Green Bay Packers to go out there and do them some favors, back-to-back years. We'll see if that can happen. We'll see if we still live on after this week. No matter what, folks. Me and Brendan will be here throughout the offseason. We'll be back here on Tuesday to chop this up, this final post-game show. But we've got a slate of scheduled streams and shows and coverage of both the free agency and the draft that will be coming up that we're going to be diving into here as we do get in the offseason. So we will be continuing to truck along here, even if our Hawks might not be so, but you never know. There's a chance, Brendan, where there's a will, there's a way. Where you get desperation, sometimes that's where you get the greatest of fights. And hopefully this week, that's what we see from our Seahawks team. Just to at least feel at least a good part, even if they don't get in the playoffs, that they came there and they brought that to the battle here with the Cardinals to give us a little bit of maybe a little glint of optimism there as we then go into what's then going to be a very long off season.
Right.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying right.
Any final thoughts from you on this with this team on anything? Just
well, I got very little. I got nothing to say. They've kind of I've run out of trying to be positive here. I've run out of things to say. None of our players were on the Epstein client list, so that's good news, right?
You got to find the positives where you can find them, man. That is saying something at least. That is saying something. I saw Carroll on there, but it was just with one L, so he's all good. He's clear. He's clear.
Yeah, we're good.
Well, I thank you guys for watching. Of course, please subscribe here. Subscribe over to Seahawks, Brendan Ellison, if you're not subscribed over there as well. We are a couple days away with the final game potentially of the season for our Hawks, but maybe they can keep alive and some fight left and still get in the playoffs. And they get in the playoffs, anything can happen. We both would love to see that. We'll just have to see how it all plays out this upcoming Sunday. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back here on Tuesday. But until that time, especially with the final game on the line, get those luck jerseys on, get any last little, rub the kitty or rub the dog or do whatever you got to do to bring the luck this Sunday for our Hawks, because Lord knows they need it. And please, by God, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.